doesn't it do this? It also picks this up, right?
It's picking it up from.
Good evening. So we are ready to start the Communications Committee. My name is Lenda Carrillo, and Mark Bowden is not here with us tonight. So I have the pleasure and the honor to run this committee tonight. Tonight with us, we have Dr. Gert, we have Lisa Palmerini, Krista and Melissa from the CCIU, Dr. Rizzo Sanders, President Cronenberg, and Lynn Golden-Moyarki. And we're going to start with a presentation from the CCIU, from Krista and Melissa, and these are the results from the communications audit that has been happened for the last couple months. So without further ado, we can go ahead and start the presentation, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carrillo. We're so happy to be here, right? It's been a long time coming. When we first engaged with Kenneth on the audit process, it was quite a while ago. But I'm really happy that we waited. You'll hear some information in regards to the timing of the audit and some really great nuggets that we were able to get because of the timing and everything else that was going on. I did want to just thank Dr. Rizzo Saunders, Ms. Palmerini, and the school board for having confidence in the CCIU to conduct this audit. I enjoyed my time spending with your community, your parents, your staff. One thing that really was profound was the pride in this district as we went through, engaging with all the different groups. There's just such a lot of pride in kind of Consolidated School District, and we were really grateful to have been able to spend the time with your community and your stakeholders to do this really important work. Lisa was an excellent resource to us. She did an outstanding job keeping us on task and giving us the information that we needed. So I'd just like to thank Ms. Palmerini for that. I did ask my assistant director, Melissa Smith, to give the bulk of the report today. Melissa has done an exceptional job going through all the data. She's really talented with that and has done many of these audits before. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to dive in.
Thank you, Krista, and again, thank you for having us here tonight. I'm going to try and work through it at a pretty good pace, just to try and get through, but it'll be a decent chunk of information, so if you want to stop me at any point in time, please do so. I definitely want to be able to answer any questions that you might have, while also keeping within the time that we have allotted this evening. Okay, so for this evening, what I kind of want to review is just a quick review of the goals of what we were trying to accomplish with this audit. We'll run through kind of the ideals, just a summary view of what was pulled together from our conversations with the board and with the administrators, run through our methodology, and then really spend the bulk of the time really focused on the key findings and opportunities as well as the associated recommendations. One of the things I do want to kind of call out as we work through this, as Krista started to say, is kind of that timing. I think there was a lot of value, some challenges as well in running it parallel with a lot of what the entry plan process was. But I think what we found in the end is there's a ton of alignment. And I think that's a real clear positive that came out of this process. So the goals of the audit, again, they were to kind of provide that comprehensive assessment of current communication efforts, create that snapshot of current perceptions, identify those gaps in the current communication strategy, and really provide that kind of baseline research that you can really build upon and really set as a foundation for strategic planning process as it relates to communications. The one thing I want to call out again is that this was a snapshot. Right? So we don't know everything and anything that happens, right? This is a snapshot in time, and it happened to be a snapshot that was during a very dynamic point in time, right? So we'll see some of the impacts of what Dr. Rizzo-Saunders has been doing as part of your entry. We'll also start to see some larger chunks of neutral when we get into some of the survey results as well. And I think that's just because we're starting to see people saying, okay, I like where this is heading, but I'm kind of gonna wait and see where we really go with it, right? So I think we'll start to see some of that as we go through. So just a quick recap of the ideals. I didn't put through all of the ideal statements, but if you remember, we created some statements that kind of fell under the categories of knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, and outcomes. And they really were kind of set as what do you want people to know, think, and feel, and how you want people to interact with the district. And it really set up our key measuring stick, really, and how we really wanted to review this audit and how we wanted to make sure the audit was unique and specific to Kennett Consolidated, right? So we do a portion of the audit that is kind of more of a functional review, right? We have some best practice rubrics from the National School Public Relations Association, and we do measure against that as some benchmarks. But really the ideals that were set here is really from a strategic view. That's how we really measured where we are and where you have left to go. So as we start to look at the methodology, we did do material audits. So yes, Ms. Palmerini was fantastic, providing some examples of some of the communication materials that are being used. We took a look at the website, look at the social media. We also ran surveys as well as focus groups, looking at the key staff, family members, and community members, okay? Now, overall, the participation rates were on the lower side compared to what we normally see with our audits. But I think a lot of that had to do with they were also being involved in focus groups and surveys for the entry, right? So kind of compete a little bit. But again, what I think too is even though perhaps our margin of error rates weren't as low as we wanted them to be, we saw 11% for staff, 9% for families, and 19% for community. So not any of these data points necessarily are statistically representative of the whole. Typically, we would look for 5% or lower for margin of error. But what we do start to see is, again, what we're seeing out of our data is aligning what was collected, right, from the larger entry plan data as well. So I think what we can start to see is a level of confidence that we're not too far off, right? The information that we're going to be running through and learning about and kind of looking to do some action on is not going to be something that's completely off scale, okay? So as you start to look at some of the data that we're doing, as I mentioned, we recognize they're in a state of transition, not only a new superintendent, new communications director as well, that this is a time to look at what are those foundational elements that are really going to set the stage that you can build and grow upon, right? And as we started to go through this audit, we found some things that we thought is really, really important and can really set you up for success in the future because they already exist. And so some of those areas, as Krista mentioned, are kind of that strong sense of pride in Kennett Consolidated, right? So survey data showed 73% of families, 76% of staff. Community was 56%, but again, that was a very small portion. And while you always would like those numbers to be even higher, what I want to show again is there's a large chunk that were in that neutral area, very, very little that were in disagreement. So you really don't have those detractors necessarily in terms of that level of pride, which I think is something that is a positive for sure.
Would you say those results are comparable to other districts and audits you've done? How would those
Yes.
compare? Oh, thank you.
Yes, and actually there'll be a couple data points, and in with the larger report as well, there is actually some comparison data as it relates to some specific points versus 6 other district audits that we've done. there is that sincere commitment to each and every student. So this really came out in the focus groups where we were able to have some more dialogue and discussion, is people are really, truly are in it for the kids. They want to see the success of the students as they come through the districts, which that's what you always want, right, is people to be invested in what the district is doing. In terms of some of the agreement about what kind of stands for, we did both prompted, where we had a list of kind of characteristics and said, how well does Kennett align with these characteristics? We also did unprompted, which was, hey, when you hear the name Kennett Consolidated School District, what's the first word that comes to mind? Across the board in all audiences, welcoming, compassionate, caring, inclusive, those were the ones that were bubbling to the top. So that's kind of like, if you think about the brand of Kennett, that really is what is in the people's minds. That's where you are at the moment, and that's a positive thing, right? Nothing wrong with that. That's what you really like to see. Just identifying there are a number of existing channels people recognize and look for, which always is good. You're not trying to figure out where things are, perhaps, but they at least know where they can go to look. And that last piece, that high level of trust in district communication. So again, one of the statements we placed in the survey was district communication is trustworthy, right? We asked people to say, how well do you agree or disagree with that statement? So going back to some of the comparative data, right, with some of our other districts, Kennett actually scored one of the highest in that area for staff and the highest average score amongst families and community, right? So district communication is trustworthy. I'll go into a slight differentiator on that as we go through this, but again, these 5 areas right here are something to really grow upon. So as we go into kind of more specifics, kind of the key findings and the strengths, I'm just going to run through each of those areas of methodology. So we'll go through the strengths found through focus groups, through the surveys, and through the materials reviewed. So overarching appreciation, ownership, connection, again, speaking to that level of pride, that sense of community is repeated quite often. Exists a sense of optimism with what has been experienced to date with new leadership. Again, that was very clear in focus groups and the open survey comments, clearly noting improvement, but still that level of folks that are like, this is fantastic. Can they keep it going, right? So looking for that. So we'll see some larger groups in neutral. The strong appreciation for multiple communication channels, looking for that consistency. There's still a desire for more consistency and organization of those channels, but again, still a strength. People are saying, we know that there's communication coming out, and they're also noted improvement just in the level of communication being sent out. Yeah.
Do you remember what channels of communication they mentioned? Like they valued Facebook, better than, I don't know, the website.
Yeah. So we asked a couple different questions. We asked in a couple different ways, right? So in the focus groups, it was much more about what communications are you receiving, just to see top of mind what they were, fresh on. Email always came up, newsletters always came up, website always came up, right? We asked in the surveys, we started to get a little bit more into what is your preference, and are you receiving just the right amount in each of these categories, or would you like more, or would you like less, right? I think unanimously across the board, email is still the preferred channel in a lot of ways, but interestingly, there was groups first definitely saying, hey, we're not getting enough in our social and web and our local news coverage, right? They really want to see more of those successes coming through. So it really depended a little bit in terms of the content area, the topics, but there definitely is kind of that indication that, multiple channels are definitely still needed.
Did you say that they wanted to see, try that one. Did you say they wanted to see consolidation of channels?
So I don't think it's necessarily consolidation of channels. I think it's more looking at clarity of purpose for each channel. So where we're not blasting out the same information on every single channel, but maybe like giving a unique twist to something, or where, like it was clear when we were saying, where would you like to see district successes kind of identified? Like it was a large portion of that was through social media, right? So if you go hard on that in social media, it's good to still share some stories on newsletters, but you may not have to go too in depth in that and leave the newsletters more to the more timely information. That makes sense. Okay. The last piece that came through in the focus groups, so the teachers are widely recognized as a district asset and strength. This was very strong amongst the parents that were part of the focus group. You know, they recognize that it's difficult working with such a diverse within such a diverse community, and they really wanted to show that appreciation for how teachers go above and beyond. They also mentioned they're seeing positive shifts in morale amongst the teachers, which is interesting for the parents to note that, right? But the interesting part too that they mentioned is that they really felt teachers have the ability to impact engagement and pride, right? So that really speaks to the opportunity for staff to really serve as ambassadors, right? Really be able to spread more of the energy, the culture, the communication that you're trying to relay. So we switch over to our surveys. So again, the first two I already mentioned, that high level of trust with communication and agreement on kind of what the brand's centered around. The strong feelings among all audiences that their opinion and input are valued at the district level. This again, in comparison to some of our other audit results, Kennett scored highest actually over other districts. But again, I want to be cautious because I do think it had a lot to do as well, not to take anything away, but I do think it's a lot to do with the timing of everything, right? And the reason I say that is because the district feeling of opinions and input was one of the highest. At the building level, it was one of the lowest. So I think that there is some things that need to be seen there. But I think just based on timing and being able to ask for the input and value is interesting there. And that large majority of staff and families are willing to recommend the district to other families. That was 74% of staff, 70% of parents. Again, pretty large neutral group in there too. Very, very low disagreement. But that neutral, it's an opportunity, right? Because they're just waiting. They're waiting for the next best thing that they can grab onto and really start to spread the news on. The last area in terms of strengths is that artifact review. So successful use of high-level visual district branding in the majority of materials. I know we've been talking with Lisa and like really hoping to really expand more the brand guidelines and so forth. But what Kennett has with the blue, the strong use of logos, she's doing a great job keeping it consistent across the board and even within campaigns. So the fact that your entry plan initiative had the same look carried from start to end, right? That is going to help hugely in consistency and people feeling that there's transparency because they're seeing that same look coming out over and over and they know I can tie all these pieces together, right? The understanding of current diversity of the population and certainly the efforts. I love the students, but also having things in more than one language. And I hear that actually you're learning the language as well, so fantastic. And strong reliance on digital channels. That's always very interesting. It's kind of key, especially for a one-person communication shop, to have metrics, right? The communications position is still actually fairly new in Kennett overall, right? So having the metrics to not only allow opportunity for recognizing which channels are working and which may need to be adjusted, but then also supporting the value of communications overall in terms of the level of engagement and action that may be taken through the communications. Any questions before I shift over to kind of areas of improvement? All right. So kind of with areas of improvement, I'm going to kind of introduce it a little differently. I'm going to look at it, how can we build up kind of consolidated internally. So this first slide is focused on the staff outcomes. So the first one, proactively align communication efforts with a strong student-centered district vision. So in the focus groups, very, very clear, the staff definitely have a commitment, but a strong desire for holistic student-focused approach. They don't feel necessarily it's always connected, some of the decisions that way, so they really would like to see that clarity. 47% of staff indicated there's a clear focus and vision, and 67% said a confidence in future. So there's a gap there, right, obviously. So really looking to say, okay, we need a strong platform that we can help communicate to our staff. This is where we're heading, and this is kind of the steps we're going to get there, and here's the role that you play in that, right? So there is that clarity in how they can participate. The clarifying expectations for how information is shared across the district to improve consistency. Again, focus group and survey input kind of indicated some inconsistencies and that feeling of disconnect, really wanting that alignment and clarity, that what is coming from one building doesn't always come from another building, or the message that is coming from district doesn't always match the message that's coming from the building. So really taking a look at that information flow. Strengthening internal community by actively engaging staff in discussions. So one of those characteristics that we measured was how well can it aligned with the term collaborative. So 57% felt that yes, the district is collaborative. 49% felt there's opportunities for two-way conversation at the district level. That did increase to 67% at the building. But what we did see is only 40% felt the district aligned with being transparent. And there's still a chunk of neutral, but there was also a pretty strong chunk, 21%, that said no, not transparent, right? So definitely information needs to be moving down through the buildings and to our staff. Improve reach by equipping and empowering staff to be district ambassadors. So kind of, again, going back, there's a recognition of the relationships they hold with a lot of the families and that ability to influence. And they're willing to share, but only 39% feel there is a clear brand, right? So they'd like to talk about it, but if you go talk to different staff members, they're all going to say something completely different, right? So how do we make sure that they've got that elevator pitch, those three things that they can speak to, right? So when we look and turn that externally, this is mostly families, some community, and again, I say that because our community representation was so small, but you're gonna see very similar things. So that first thing is the same exact thing as internal. Because similar to staff, only 50% of families felt there was a clear focus and vision, 61% were confident in the future, right? So they need to have that clarity of where we're heading. Establish County Consolidate as the central source of information. Again, transparency, again, was a challenge. Out of the list of characteristics we provided, transparency was at the very bottom. 48% of families felt the district was transparent. I throw out 33% of community, again, very small representation from community, but it is kind of some context of what may be out there, right? Actively promote opportunities for connection, collaboration, engagement. So 49% of families, 44% of community felt that the district is collaborative. And what we saw through some conversation, there's a number of community members that want to get involved. They just don't know how or where to go. Leverage that existing pride and dedication among families and community partners. Again, that desire for more information, that willingness to share. Only 28% of families felt there was a clear brand. So again, very, very important that there's kind of this define what the district stands for. So kind of based on those key findings, we started to recognize some core themes that were coming out of this, right? So I'm going to share 4 of those themes, and those will then dive right into the 4 kind of areas of recommendation that we have as well. So in terms of the first 2 areas, very clear. I think you all figured this out. Clarify and unify the district's brand and vision. Interestingly, district vision and key initiatives, we asked, there was a number of topic areas, and we asked how well informed people felt on some of the areas. Funny enough, district vision and key initiatives was actually one of the top areas that they felt more informed on. But again, I think that shows some of the efforts being made around the entry plan and some of the early results as it relates to some of the strategic places that we may be looking to go. I think that stronger platform that needs to build out in order to keep it going is going to be what's needed. The enhanced trust and transparency through consistent communication, all the different transitions and so forth, they're really going to need to see that consistency and outreach. I think it was done very well as it relates to the entry plan because there was a clear place that people could go. You gave consistent updates as to how things were going. You kind of interacted with all of the audiences. on that initiative. Those are the types of things they're going to continue to look for as you get into more of your goal areas, your strategic planning areas. The last two themes that kind of came out that bridge the gap between district and school level communication. Again, typically with these audits, we see increases in terms of transparency, trust, feelings of value and so forth as you move from district to buildings to teachers. And it makes sense, right? Because as families and community members, you interact at the building level more often than you do at the district. And it's harder to put, other than the superintendent, it's harder to put a face to the district to actually feel a true relationship, right? But what we were seeing is that the district was doing pretty well and the teachers were still doing well, but there's a gap at the buildings. So we're not seeing that increase that we typically see.
Just a quick question. Is there a divide between secondary versus elementary on those numbers?
So I didn't go down to that level just because our margin of error wasn't that great to begin with. And if we go even further, it's going to be vast. I can certainly look into that just to kind of see. I do know from the focus groups, though, that very clearly they felt communication was much stronger at the elementary level. And as you move up, it starts to fall back. And part of that, they said, is because as students get older and become more independent, that the communication comes through the student, right? Rather than direct. Parents still want it direct.
Or maybe it doesn't come from the student, having two high school students myself. But I think there's some validity to what you're saying as far as the different buildings have different strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And that last piece, that strengthen community engagement and inclusion. So, part of it is centered around that we really had a lower than desired community participation, and we really didn't get the participation that we wanted among our Spanish-speaking population. So from an audit, it wasn't all fully rounded, in my opinion, because of that, because I know that that's such a strong portion. So I actually went back and reviewed some of the communication input that we received during the superintendent's search, those notes. And I also connected with some of our CCIU bilingual staff that serve in Kennett local areas. And I spoke with them just to kind of see too, like what kind of input and insights they might provide. But I think it is something that when we're saying engaging full community, that we truly are continuing to engage the community at all levels. Right? All right, so then the last part, the recommendations. I think you kind of have an inkling of where we're heading. Sure, go ahead.
So when you were talking about the Spanish-speaking families and how difficult it was for you to have them participate in this survey, did you ask your staff, what do they think it's not connecting? Like, why do you think they're not participating? And also, since, I'm thinking if the Spanish-speaking families didn't participate out of the 200, how many? 200 surveys, or is this accurate for the Spanish-speaking families? If we don't have a good representation, because 48% of the student body is Latinos, and if we don't have their input, I'm concerned.
No, and I absolutely hear you, and that's why I was kind of trying to find some other avenues as well. I think part of it is, in those that we did speak to, interesting, like they were like overly positive, like 100%, everything's fantastic kind of thing, which also makes me nervous too. Well, I love that for you guys, but I think that maybe is not representative fully, right? So part of the recommendations we go into too is diving deeper into that, because just in my conversations with our CCIU folks, there's a couple things that come into play, right? One is that the US school system is completely different than the school systems in a lot of their home countries, right? And in terms of the level of participation that we invite of our parents and community members is not something that typically is done in a lot of their home countries. Like usually they're like, the schools are the experts, they do what they need to do kind of thing, we trust them. So to ask for input is something different. So there's part of that. The other piece of it is, I think, what they had mentioned is they don't like to stand out either. So when they're in meetings or in community events or at, school functions, they don't want to ask for help necessarily because they don't want to stand out. So part of that kind of prevents people some hesitation if they're not feeling strong enough in how they want to speak and talk to an interpreter or translate something. That can prevent some of that as well, even though I know we said we had interpreters available at all of our focus groups, and we would break them out into a separate room so they could speak in their free language and just go. But it is to be treated different is also kind of prohibitor. So I think there's other things too that we learned through that process, but I think some of those things are just examples of what might cause some hesitation. So kind of going into the recommendations, so obviously that first one is to strengthen and unify the narrative and vision. You have your mission statement, you have a vision statement, right? But what do those mean in action? What are those areas that truly the district is focused on and committed on in order to make those happen, right? And that's the platform, that's the promise that you're giving to your community as a whole. And those are the things that if you have 3 or 4 things that you can say, these are the 4 things, and you can start to really initiate that into everything you do, people are going to start recognizing that, realizing that, and that starts to become kind of the brand. Once you have that kind of platform figured out, then that narrative that says, this is where we are, where we were, this is where we are, and this is where we're going. And being able to weave those into that so that it's a story that can be retold by multiple people. Once you have that, it's really all about increasing the visibility on all of your messaging platforms, incorporating the narrative. So, it goes into convocation, it goes into, how the newsletters might be set up, or how social media you might have specialty hashtags so that you start to call out different pieces of what your messaging platform is about. And the last piece, and there's more details that are in kind of the fuller report that we provided in terms of specific tactics and stuff, but just wanted to give a high level of what we're looking for. The last piece of that employee recognition is if we're saying this is what the district's all about and we fully recognize that our staff are really what make a lot of that happen, right? It's to recognize the staff that do an excellent job at really bringing this to life, right? Before I go into the next one, I did want to back up just real quick. I do want to say it's important what we're suggesting, because we'll go into a little bit beyond this, is that a lot of this is going to go beyond Lisa's role, right? It can't just be her. And so a number of things may start with Lisa and with Dr. Rizzo-Saunders and having those conversations, but it really takes the kind of the investment and the involvement of all administrators and our staff to really make that fully come alive and be effective. The other note is that as we walk through these can't all happen at once. So looking to kind of like plan over time a little bit. This first recommendation, however, I would say that's one that you probably want to do sooner rather than later. And I think timing wise, because you're working through the strategic planning process as well, it's the ideal time. Everything starts to align, right? The second area, as relates to enhancing transparency with proactive strategic communication, kind of started to talk through a little bit as it relates to that consistency, but part of that is reviewing the current flow of information and clarifying messengers, right? What are those areas that should come from the superintendent? What are those areas that might be best coming from the director of pupil services? What's best coming from the buildings? Or if it comes from the district office, how do the buildings kind of build on it, make it relatable to their audiences, but without changing fully the messaging, right? So how do we start to make sure that that consistent message starts to come through and work through? And part of that's just some communication protocols and understanding to clarify that. Prioritizing proactive communication. So as I mentioned, kind of that as you start to identify the strategic areas, really saying, okay, these are our core initiatives. And we're going to keep making sure that we're going to keep doing touch points on each of these on a regular basis, right? It may be that there may not be an update on something. That piece of information is just as important as if there was an update, right? Because in the lack of information, that's where rumors start, right? So making sure that you're continuous in how you reach and touch point, especially on those key initiatives. And the last piece that is leveraging internal ambassadors. So as we talked about, the staff are a huge tool and a huge benefit for the district. So how do we make sure that they feel informed enough to be able to share information, to perhaps correct misinformation that they might hear, be able to share ideas, be able to share what's happening in their classrooms. These are all ways that the staff can get engaged and be a part of this as well as ambassadors. The third area kind of builds off that. So it's taking the idea of staff ambassadors and really how do we continue to cultivate that culture of engagement and collaboration. A lot of it is continuing those opportunities for input, whether that's surveys or focus groups on various topics. The committee structure is also very, people feel that they are heard when they're going through that, seeing representation, especially around larger initiatives. So that's continuing. But it's also saying, how can we help do this and make those touch points around various groups? So with families, taking a look at parent influencers. I'm sure you all know parents that are strong influencers in the community, positive or negative. Those are the people you want to be best friends with. You want to be connected with. Talking to them, soundboard, the more that you connect with those folks, the more that they'll work with you, right, versus against. Leveraging PTO, they're your biggest supporters. So how can we make sure that they kind of feel involved and engaged in whatever they may be able to help with? Students. So I don't know if it's fully representative, but it definitely was a strong statement that was made in one of the parent focus groups, as they felt that there just isn't the student, like school spirit that there used to be. This was an alumni, obviously. And they're like, where is it? They do their thing and they leave right away. Like they want to have that more engaged feeling, that strong community feeling, that strong hype. So part of the way you can kind of explore that, obviously, is getting the students involved in determining solutions. They know their peers best. So whether that's utilizing the clubs already established at the high schools, but definitely continue to involve middle school and some of the older elementary as well, because they're going to grow into that and they're going to have that opportunity to really engage. Student advisories, keeping students connected when they become alumni. Those are the things that are going to continue to engage and keep them invested in the district. At the community level, similarly, you have a lot of great partnerships already in place. Promote them, highlight them, recognize them, acknowledge them continually, because that's what's going to help you continue to expand those partnerships as well. As I mentioned, a large majority said email is still the preferred channel, right? So really doing a very specific focus on trying to create that community email list. It may still require some print, but you might be able to do 2 or 3 print pieces and then really fill it in with the digital because you've actively pushed for people to join the list. English learner families is kind of getting at really spending some additional time gaining understanding. What are those barriers? What's keeping them? And some of those barriers may be work-related and as it relates to their lower income. They want to get as many hours they possibly can to support their family. They're not going to sacrifice that income for coming to a school function. So if we had that opportunity, what are those ways that we can watch their kids, feed them dinner, like do those things to try and help them become engaged. Part of that is engaging the community leaders, the people they trust, whether that's their churches, whether a lot of the students go to the garage is what they were saying as well. So knowing they've got those connections there as well. But really looking for those community leaders that can come in. There was that request to kind of revive Cafe and Familia, which I think is already kind of in process. But that was the biggest thing that they felt there was that it's common communities speaking common language or variations, because that's the other piece. There's always dialects, so It's always going to be, some misunderstandings as it relates to translations, but being able to work and learn together, and making it more comfortable to understand and learn about the school systems and to be able to ask their questions without feeling different, right? So a lot of those ways and just trying to keep them engaged. The last area of recommendation is just improving accessibility and ease of information sharing. Kind of going back to reviewing each of the existing channels, clarifying the purpose of each, optimizing the public access to information. So obviously the websites are brand new. I love the fact that we have on there, do you have recommendations? So that people can continue to provide, yeah, this is missing, I don't know where this is, or I love how this is going. I think there's some pages on there, the Share Your Voice, the community pages that have great potential in terms of the opportunity to share more information and engage. So that's there. And the ensure accessibility, again, there's a number of English learner suggestions in there too, just as it relates to making sure interpretation is always available. It's not something they have to ask for because they may not. And kind of making sure that we always have maybe a native language proofreading and making sure that sometimes the translations kind of go askew. So how do we make sure that what it reads actually is going to make sense to the recipient as well? So there's a number of additional details in the fuller report, but these are kind of the broader scale recommendations. And again, open to take any questions that you have.
Question, I've asked this before, that we have our community members, our taxpayers who either no longer have or don't have students in the district. And a decade ago, we would push out a district newsletter to let them know what their tax dollars are doing, what's going on. And it seems like what we're doing now is mostly a pull communication. We don't have a push communication to anyone who does not have a current student. And does anything in your study address that, or any recommendations of how to address that?
Yeah, I think, as it relates to, trying to get the email list to get it into where they prefer, but there is the recommendation. I mean, obviously, the only way they're going to reach everyone, because there's a number of districts that are always going to struggle with this, because you can try email, you can try paid social, you can try using some of the local news outlets and so forth. You're not going to get everybody, right? The only way you're going to get everybody is through direct mail, right? So it's that opportunity to look at how do we push out some information that then allows additional ways to engage.
Yeah, and realistically, we don't really have a local press, certainly not a supportive one. We talked at one point in time, a newsletter stuffed into the tax bill. We know that gets into their hands. That's only once a year, but if you want, we either have to pay to mail every taxpayer, or there's something's being mailed out anyway, but getting them to go to the website and sign up, again, you're getting them to pull it down as opposed to push. And if they don't have a current student, they may never go to a website.
Correct, absolutely. And the other piece that we, to explore, and I don't know the level of support or outreach that the connections they might have that your local townships, municipalities might have, but that's always another avenue as well.
And if I may, I've already started doing some research on that. I've spoken to a connection, which actually CCIU helped me with, to access paid lists based on our, varying townships. So I have a number on those, because if we want to do that larger print about summary of the year, we would need to have that, because we really don't have that in our system. So that is definitely something we are looking at, and I already have a number of households that we could mail to, and costs associated and that kind of thing. So definitely on our list for planning is a printed communication, for sure.
Dr.
Agreed.
McMahon and New Garden Township also get the Avongrove annual report, which we have provided to Ms. Palmerini. So yes, it's on the radar.
I think before I had kids, this is 25 years ago, I used to get the newsletter in my, I don't know if that was with the water bill or something, and I used to read it. It had a lot of pictures, and I didn't have kids, so I'm sure, other people without kids appreciate having information, even if, they don't have any kids in the district anymore. They want to hear. They're part of alumni. What else? You mentioned the Garage Youth Center, and I want to thank the Garage. I know nobody's here, but you listen to me. The Garage Youth Center does an outstanding job. They do after-school activities for middle school and high school, Monday through Thursday. They have a location in Kennett Square and a location in Avondale. And at times they get 60, 65 students from Kennett in high school, and they get help with homework, with different enrichment activities, with college applications, with FAFSA applications, and many, many more programs and resources. So, that's a true collaboration that we have. I know people from the district has been in the Garage Youth Center. So thank you for mentioning that. And also I want to thank you for this presentation. I was very pleased with the strengths. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, we're doing great. And then we get to the recommendations, and it's, it's very, very normal to, have a list of recommendations after we have an audit, and we were expecting that. And thank you so much for the list of recommendations. I'm sure we can take it from here, but thank you very much. And I just don't know if anybody else has any more comments.
I do have a couple comments and questions, but first of all, I would wonder what Lisa and Dr. Rizzo-Saunders might have to say about hearing these results.
I was really fortunate in that I received this presentation prior to this meeting so that I could kind of, think it through, and Michael actually is part of that presentation. Plus, we also received the data as part of our subcommittee efforts with community members and staff members and administration. So I've been sitting with this for a while. I'm actually really excited because I believe strongly that we're moving in the right direction, that the entry plan report and the subcommittee work will all inform what we're doing for communication. So a positioning statement for the district that aligns with our mission, vision, core values, and the insights that we're gaining through our subcommittees is extremely important. They've also reinforced for me, and all of you know based on my previous presentations, that I've been in a process, a step process. And I find it really interesting that families are noting those areas that I have not paid attention to yet, like social media, that engagement, right? And inspiration. So I'm feeling really good about their recommendations, and I believe as a team we can accomplish a good amount moving forward. And I do also concur that it's going to be some time for us to accomplish everything. But I appreciate the effort for sure, and the partnership that we developed in the process.
So, and I would just echo that and add that what we're seeing is consistent with the things that are bubbling up for strategic plans. So I feel like it's really beginning to come together. And I think that, this gives us a really good way in which to reach the audiences that we need to reach. And hoping there's going to be another focus group opportunity next week. So, I really like talking to our parents and community members, so I'm glad that they feel like they want to be a part of our journey moving forward.
And, anybody else?
I appreciate your comments. I feel like you learned Kennett pretty well throughout this process, so I'm glad you got to meet Kennett. When is the report going to, is the report going to be available to us and on the website, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, the report itself, like I said, it's pretty lengthy. It is, at least it does have that, and certainly made available as needed.
Good to know. It's funny hearing what you had to say, because as I was listening, I was revisiting the superintendent search and some other things that we've gone through where, we've seen evidence of those things. And I hear that we need to strengthen and unify our narrative vision And like, I think we try to do that, but, clearly, people hear what they hear and not always as much as we say. So that's where I think we need to work as a district to get our message out there. And there's always improvements that we can make. To echo Linda's comments, thank you very much for your partnership and the CCIU's partnership in doing this. It's very valuable to us. It's exactly what we were looking for speaking as a board member, when we started this process. We have been told that most boards of directors don't have a communications committee. We have one because of the problems and the solutions that we need. And so this is a step, big step in that direction. With that, Linda, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you again.
Anybody else? Any other comments? No?
I do just want to share, well, thank you for your comments and your feedback. I did have the benefit of participating in the superintendent search along with the board. And, I did want to kind of expand on what you said, Linda, about the participation from the English learner families within your community. And we did see similarities in response rates and in focus group participations. But I think what the beauty of that is now it's an opportunity, right, to really figure out how do we reach these folks in our community, what is the right way, because, a couple examples of struggling, right, challenges and recent examples. And so I think that is, something that while we didn't necessarily get the data, we certainly identified what those challenges were. I'm sure there were some that were already known, but definitely something to kind of hone in on and really put some energy towards, which I know that this district, Dr. Rizzo Saunders and Lisa are doing. So.
Yeah, and I know Dr. Rizzo Sanders, she's already out there in the community. She participated in the After the Bell program. After the Bell serves many Latino students, all students, but they have, big percentage in Latinos participating. So I really appreciate you being out there in the community and, let the community know that all students matter. So thank you. So I think that's it. I don't know, do we finish the meeting early or do we stay here until 7?
No.
Okay, so thank you everyone for participating.
You may declare us adjourned.
1, 2.
Microphone, there we go. I'm sure you heard that without the microphone. It is a few minutes after 7. We're all here, and President Cronenberg will rejoin us in a moment. And so this is the Finance Committee meeting. Dr. McVeigh, I believe, is getting another surgery tonight.
He had it today.
He had it today, so he will not be here. He's probably on some good drugs. And we have Dr. Gerth is here with us, so we have the entire committee. We wish Dr. McVeigh well. And so let's just jump right into it. So we'll jump into our general operating budget, which I gave some tips the last meeting of what direction this is heading, but now we're going to get some details. So Mr. Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Finnegan, and I'm sure those medications are all prescribed medications for
Yes.
Dr. McVeigh.
He's getting a knee replacement, so just so the public knows.
That's right.
It's not a HIPAA violation, he's mentioned it.
That's right. All right, we're going to try to bring some clarity to Mr. Finnegan's crystal ball forecast that was mentioned at the board meeting, and indeed, he was right on. We saw this coming shortly after we proposed our preliminary budget back in the month of January, approved by the board in February. We have a couple items here attached into board docs. We have one that is the presentation for this evening. The other one is a short summary of our revenues and expenses, coined our budget at a glance. This is for the proposed, this is preliminary, but this is for the proposed final budget that will be approved, hopefully by the school board, next Monday evening. The proposed final budget does not carry any tax implications this time. It is the second approval of the school board, one of 3. So you've approved the preliminary budget. Next Monday, we look forward to the approval of the proposed final, and the real meaningful budget will be approved in June, and that will set the tax rates, which are also approved at the June board meeting. We've made some adjustments. This means very little other than when you start getting down to the bottom half of the section for our residential, commercial, industrial taxpayers. The proposed budget came out at a 2.8%. That has now since increased, and we're going to cover the specifics both in revenue and expenses that have now pushed us right to the Act 1 index of 4%. With that, let me go back to... And this is, once again, attached to board docs for those individuals that are watching online or wanted to peruse it at your own convenience. It is attached to board docs for this evening's meeting. There's a brief recap on the first couple of slides. These were all presented with our preliminary budget presentation back in January. Once again, some of these assumptions now have changed. We have not included any additional funding, once again, for the construction of Greenwood and/or New Garden. In fact, we were able to reduce our budget in the area of debt service. When we borrowed the $120 million for these projects, we had done forecasting and estimated interest. It came in. Now that that is complete, we've done 4 borrowings to fund those projects. Our annual debt service came in later by $541,000. That was removed at the preliminary budget. We also did not include any new staffing with the preliminary budget. That has changed, and we're going to cover the areas that we've added staff since the preliminary budget. And finally, once again, this speaks to the Act 1 index of 4%. It also speaks to the fact that the budget, the preliminary budget and this proposed final budget have no direct tax implications yet. The final budget, June 9th, 2025, will at that point in time. We also reviewed a couple of things that were outstanding. One was the tax assessment appeals of the 2 large buildings in the borough of Kennett Square, both housing the Genesis Healthcare. One is on Union and State. The other one is on Broad and State. So the 2 corners of those buildings, the buildings are primarily vacant at this point in time. We have reached a settlement. You're going to see that in one of the future slides. But at the time of the preliminary budget, we were anticipating a potential loss of $341,000. Once again, as a review, this spreadsheet, exactly with the exception of review at the top, was presented with our preliminary budget. We set the tax rate at 2.81%, which set our mills at 34.5924. We had no appropriation of fund balance. We had the state subsidies, basic ed, at 2%. That has changed. We're going to review that. Special education, transportation, hold harmless provision, that has remained the same. And once again, we do not need any referendum exceptions, even at the proposed 4% budget we're at, because we are at the Act 1 index, not over it. Once again, this is a review of the preliminary budget. We were at a 2.81% tax increase, or $172 per residential homeowner. That was the increase. Now we're moving on to the proposed final budget. Remember, we have a preliminary budget, a proposed final budget, and then a final budget. This is the proposed final budget that has to be approved at least 30 days in advance of our final budget, so we do this typically in the month of April. The proposed final budget, we did settle on the 2 tax assessment appeals. To settle, we not only had to come to agreement with the district, the owner of the properties, but also the county and the Borough of Kennett Square all had to agree to the new assessment. That has been completed. We received the court order. The loss to the district of those 2 properties now will be recognized at $323,000. All right, so we're going to pull that $323,000 right out of our local real estate tax line item, which is the largest line item in our budget. Second of all, we talked to East Marlboro. We've talked to Keystone Collections Group, which collects the earned income tax for all of Chester County through our tax collection district. They, in fact, are moving forward. They will not take a vote, is our understanding, till the month of September. But at this point in time, they feel it is highly probable that they will be enacting the earned income tax of 0.5% in East Marlboro. We currently collect 1%. Their enactment will begin effective January 1st, which is halfway through our fiscal year. Therefore, we would recognize half of the loss. The total loss that Keystone provided us was $416,000. Therefore, we would recognize a loss of $208,000 in the 25-26 fiscal year. If they don't approve it, we can then revert back, and this will be included at 1% for the 26-27 budget. But at this time, it is our understanding, and I know Mr. Finnegan's been sending me documentation that the East Marlboro Borough has been producing. It doesn't affect all their taxpayers because many of the taxpayers in East Marlboro are already paying the 1%, and Kennett Consolidated School District benefits from all 1%. So it's only those individuals that do not work in an area that has an earned income tax and reside in East Marlboro, not Independent 1 East Marlboro. So there are a lot less than the entire tax-paying constituents in East Marlboro that already are paying the tax. We received the governor's proposed budget. It did fall short. There are winners and losers in the governor's budget as they are trying to equalize the spending per student across the state. And this was a key factor. That spreadsheet was shared out at the last Finance Committee meeting. So please, if you want to see the details for the Chester County schools, go back to the March Finance Committee meeting, and you can see the distribution of state subsidies for basic education, which is the largest, special education, and transportation, and ready-to-learn grant. Unfortunately, we budgeted 2%, which typically we come in with a preliminary budget at 0. We were optimistic, put 2%, and got a little bit shy of 1%. The overall increase would have been more, but our enrollment is decreasing. I think this committee, as well as the board, is very aware. That also is part of the formula, so we actually received less than we anticipated, and we've made that correction in the proposed final budget. It is a decrease of $96,000 from our basic education budget. And finally, the other addition here is the credit recovery program. It's currently under evaluation. There was more discussion this morning about it, but it's somewhat in flux. We're looking at the rigor of the program, the component of charging for the program, as well as just the construction of the program. So rather than building into the budget, we're looking at actually funding that out of a fund balance appropriation for the 25-26 year. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation.
Couple bullet points on what the credit recovery program is.
Yes, and I will turn this over to Dr. Rizzo-Saunders. She probably can give a better explanation since it is an educational program.
Sure. So traditionally, credit recovery was often referred to as summer school. We have the extended school year program for students who have that in their plans. Summer school or credit recovery is for middle schoolers and high schoolers who need to come back to school because something happened during the year and they may have just fallen short of mastering those subjects.
That makes perfect sense. In my head, credit meant something to do with a loan. And I would, we're in Finance Committee, right? So, thank you.
Thank you for that explanation, and we're going to move on. You're going to start seeing a summary of all these items being incorporated into the proposed final budget. The proposed final budget has now moved to a 4% real estate tax increase, which would equate to a 34.9942 millage rate. We're appropriating $60,000 from our fund balance for the credit recovery program. We have our state subsidies updated now to reflect the governor's budget, which called for the reduction in our basic ed. We have also incorporated 2 new positions, and the new positions have been thoroughly vetted by our administrative team. We've had a multitude of discussions. We have looked at reallocation. We've looked at collapsing positions. Some of that may still occur, but at this point in time, we felt the need to actually include 2 additional special education positions, both for learning support, one at Greenwood and one at New Garden. There is some other internal moves, but they are basically a budget neutral. So there are some other shifting and reallocations going on, some administrative even positions that are being reallocated, but they do not impact the budget because it is a one-for-one trade. But we are looking at all of the elementary ratios as well as all of our pupil services positions in great detail. So if there are additional savings to be recaptured, we'll bring that forward. In the meantime, I would encourage you to go back and look at the CCIU special education audit. That did highlight several deficiencies in our staffing and program in the special education and pupil services areas. So this is the minimal amount I would like to say. We had a fairly long list of requests. District-wide, there was over 30 positions requested with justification for each position tied to either our balanced scorecard, the comprehensive education plan, or our strategic plan. So we have developed a spreadsheet for them to submit for each staffing request. I do not want to minimize the work that went into that. There's plenty of justification. It still is a useful tool as we have any retirement, resignation, or opening thereof. We'll take a look and prioritize what position. So don't assume if a social studies teacher, departs for any particular reason at the high school, it will just be filled. That position is scrutinized with all of our priorities, and then we'll either post it or not. Sure.
Just to make sure I understood, did you say 30 positions were requested? 30?
Yes.
And 2 out of these 30, only 2 were approved?
That's
Is that
correct.
what I understood?
That is correct.
I'm curious as to what the other 28, what were, if you don't have the listing there, it's okay, but what were the other 28 that were?
Yeah, I'd be happy to furnish that document to the board. We do have it. If Dr. Brady has consolidated to a single spreadsheet, I don't have that with me this evening, but I'd be happy to.
I'm just
present that
curious to
the
see if
board.
any bilingual positions were rejected and
Yes,
not
there's no
approved out of the
specific,
30.
there was no specific positions that were identified as bilingual. We did have translation services, which we are working on, not through a new position, but things as innovative as this evening with both the translation board and the headset that is here. So we've identified a problem. How that problem is being resolved is currently under, I would say, discussion. But there was only the one position. It was a high school translator that they've requested.
Maybe, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, and you think the high school translator is not needed because of the other services that?
No, it's not
the
that they're not
district-
needed. They're all prioritized. It's a matter of weighing the scales. We have a 4% limit. We have existing staff. We also have ways that we become more efficient in delivery of services. So all these factors are taken into place. We do have, for example, the posting, we're looking for like bilingual social workers. Now we're looking at potentially making them mandated both English and Spanish speakers. So we're trying to resolve it without just layering on staff to fill a need.
Okay, thank you.
Just moving through the presentations to put a little numerical value to each one of these areas. The real estate tax appeals, the $323,000 was a reduction from revenue. The earned income tax was $208,000 reduction from revenue. We did increase our interim real estate taxes. That was sort of the way that we actually had it bouncing at the 4%. We were actually a little bit over 4%, but we put $45,000 just to bring it down right to the 4% and not go over the index. basic education, there's a couple things in there that made us pull it down to 113, not just the 96,000, but that is now matches the state subsidy proposal. Special education went up by 657, accountability block grant 15,822. So if you net those three state subsidies, that'll be the identical number that was presented on a previous spreadsheet under basic ed. PSER Social Security, we're bringing the new positions in. Remember, we have to put full retirement in. This is the revenue offset to that. And then we had the fund balance appropriation of $60,000 to pay for the credit recovery program for this summer. Total reductions of revenue, $453,605. So these are just the revenues, about $500,000 lost. The new positions, $335,796. That is not the salary for new positions, that is salary and benefits for new positions. So that's all in. Credit recovery program matches the appropriation of $60,000. Our medical renewal did come in slightly less. We actually had a very favorable medical renewal for our medical and prescription. I don't want to minimize that because some of the surrounding districts actually received quite significant increases, like 20%. So we were at about a 6% rollover for medical overall, which was very favorable for us this year. It just kind of got lost with all the other increases within the budget. And you can see the total expenditure increases $356,000. So really what we're looking at is the 453 plus the 356. That's that $800,000 that we needed to make up. And that's where you got that extra 1.2% in your tax increase. What does that mean in dollars and cents to the average residential taxpayer? Remember, this was 170, now it's up to 246. That was an increase of $74 over the preliminary budget. I don't want that to be confused. It's not a $72 or $74 increase over last year's. It's $246 over last year's tax bill. We just wanted to note, these are some considerations. You know, sometimes we would like to consider pushing down the taxes, whether that's an influx of fund balance. I just wanted to give you some idea of what's on the horizon. We do have revenues. This would be the second half. Now we're going 2 years out, so starting to develop the 26-27 budget, which will really start in October of this year. However, some of the things that we know we have to address right away are the second half of the earned income tax going away for East Marlboro. That'll bring the total revenue for East Marlboro down $416,000, but we only took 208 out of this next year, 25-26. We'd have to take the second out of 26-27. We applied successfully for a PCC grant for mental health. That is incorporated into the 25-26 year. That will be used to offset existing mental health therapists that are in our schools. So we have $173,000. Unless that grant is renewed, and they are competitive grants, we will not have that grant. So we're going to need to find something to backfill that grant. We also have plans since the inception of the new elementary schools, because each school is 30,000 square feet bigger, so that's 60,000 square feet of additional space for our custodial maintenance staff. That is the equivalent size of this building that we're currently in. So Mary D. Lang is a little over 70,000 square feet. That would require that we add at least 2 custodial positions and 1 maintenance position just to cover the additional sizes of the buildings. So the total required funding prior to our customary rollover, that's before we roll over all of our existing teachers, admin, support staff, salary, benefits. It's our debt service. It's all of our supplies. We need to raise $631,000 in 26-27. So just taking a look a little beyond next year as to what we're in store for in 26-27. And that's really where we're at. I will not be at next Monday's meeting. I will be on vacation. Dr. Brady will be prepared to answer any questions you have in the public meeting, but certainly this evening I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Mark, have any discussion yet on contingency plans in case we see a substantial reduction in IDA, Title I, our lunch programs, just to name a few, our food subsidies that we get?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking, it's we certainly are dependent upon many of our federal subsidies, whether they're the entitlement grants that we have, that's Title I through Title IV, whether it's our USDA subsidy that we receive for our free and reduced breakfast and lunch program, or our IDA money that we receive from both the IU and our medical access money. So we have over 2.8 million that we receive annually. It really depends upon the severity of the cuts. And we've had some discussions at this time, since it's such an unknown and since it's such a devastating loss, not only to Kennett, but to every district, not only in the state, but across the nation. I mean, you're talking literally millions upon millions of kids that qualify for free and reduced lunches. I mean, it would be deep, significant cuts that would affect every child. I think that potential is very low, and I'm willing to roll the dice going in, saying we will make the accommodations throughout the course of the year if and when those cuts happen. I mean, because all of
Not
our,
very comforting, but that's okay.
yeah, I mean,
We don't know what to expect yet, I know that.
free and reduced, I mean, unfortunately, the burden would fall back on, you know, the parents of the children. But we have contracts with Chartwells that guarantee certain number of meal counts. I mean, you just couldn't produce the volume of food with half the participation. All of our title programs, Title I, are identified with typically employees. I mean, we staff heavy in the grants rather than using them for supply or summer programming. So you have a lot of bodies, but you know, you could make a decision, which would come before the board, to actually furlough individuals due to economic reasons. So these decisions would be weighed very carefully. But you know, right now, I think there's a lot of hearsay out there without a lot of substance. I think we just go forward. We have another 2 months until the June 9th board meeting to really wait and see what happens. And if we do see cuts, we have some open, honest discussions and see how deep the cuts have to go.
Okay, and I did want to point out, it wasn't in the presentation, it may have been, but again, that the, none of the expenditure increases in the preliminary or the additional $50 in the proposed have anything to do with the cost for the 2 elementary schools that we're building. They're fully funded at this time. These are all due to the things that Mr. Tracy pointed out with loss of revenue from tax assessments, appeals, and earned income tax and new positions. Any other questions? You?
No, I just, a couple of things that I wanted to point out. First, to Dr. Garrett's question, I think that we are very fortunate to be in the strong fiscal position that we are in, that we can say, you know, we're going to hold and wait and wait and see. So, you know, you should be giving a lot of credit to both this committee, but also to our CFO, Mark. Additionally, I think that the board just needs to congratulate Mark and the administration coming in with only about $350,000 in increased expenditures is really impressive. Basically, in order to do that, we needed to pull in and find the $450,000 in lost revenue, but also all the increases in salary for the teachers. So I just want to make sure that I'm sure everyone here at the table does understand, but for those watching at home, that this minimal increase to the budget, although it is at the top of the index, is actually programmatically a cut in our services. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear to everybody.
And I'm just going to reemphasize mostly what Dr. Rizzo-Saunders said. This board has no interest in tax increases. But as Dr. Rizzo-Saunders just said, the proposed final budget is actually a cut in services. And we are mandated by law to provide these services. And for example, the 2 positions that are being added for special education are because we are mandated to provide these services, and we are happy to do so. And that's why those positions are being added. So I appreciate the community's support. I wish that we weren't presenting this number tonight, but we are, and there's good, solid reason for it. And as we move forward and we see the U.S. Department of Education, potentially changing its funding, as we just discussed a little bit, we'll see where that goes. Thank you.
Did you have another question, Linda, or?
No, yeah, just want to say thank you to Mr. Tracy and his team for working very hard. This is it is very easy to understand this budget, and I'm sure a lot of parents have questions as to why we're creating two new jobs and not, like the translation or translating job at the high school. But Mr. Cronenberg said it, these are two positions that we need to mandate it to create. So I'm glad you said that. Thank you. But I have questions about the lunch for the parents who are listening. I don't know how many parents are listening, but if any parent is listening, should they be concerned about the federal changes that are happening or about to happen?
I'm going to speak for the district and say no.
Okay.
There should be no concern. I don't know what it will look like in 1 month or in 1 year, but as Mr. Tracy mentioned, we are going to play it by ear and see where this lands, and I don't want there to be concern.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification.
Okay, any other questions on the budget? Okay, and then now we'll move on to an explanation of the Ever-Driven program agreement. And I think it's back to Mr. Tracy.
Okay, and before we totally close on the budget, certainly we have 2 more months before we're looking for the board approval. Mrs. Carrillo, we will get you that list of requested staff members, but certainly we have 2 more Finance Committee meetings. If there are any special interests that you would like us to take a deeper dive in, it doesn't necessarily have to have a budget impact, just something of your knowledge base and expanding that, certainly let us know and we can put it on the agenda. All right, moving on, we're not going to take a lot of time reviewing this. I just didn't want the board meeting to be the first time you saw the proposal to have an agreement with Ever-Driven. Ever-Driven, I'm going to keep it simple, is the Uber or Lyft for school districts. The district's transportation has become more and more complex with the McKinney-Vento Act. There are many displaced students. They would typically be referred to as homeless. I think the preferred now is displaced students. We have many of them that come to Kennett Consolidated School District but live in communities well beyond our borders. There are many of these individuals that due to driver shortages and cost, it is not economically feasible for us to drive a full-size passenger bus, a 72-passenger bus, down to pick up a kindergarten student living in Wilmington, and then head out to West Grove to pick up a high schooler, and then out to Westchester. So we have multiple deviations from our routes, and some of the students, we just can't accommodate the needs, because if that individual is displaced on a Friday, we would like to have them back in school on Monday. This isn't always a circumstance of socioeconomics. There could be a fire displacement. There could be many reasons that students are displaced, but when they are identified, we must accommodate them if they choose to continue their education in Kennett. And these are sometimes multi-year arrangements. So we bus, I think it's over 200 kids now back into the district. Many of them just reside over the border. So if they're in West Grove, it's really not problematic for our bus system to service that, but when you have the one-off that happens to be in Downingtown, that becomes very complex. So we were looking for some alternatives. Tom Jenkins and I happened to run across this vendor at the PASBO conference. They provide services. The unique feature that they have is all of their drivers go through a complete HR vetting process. We will have all the clearances required in our hands before this individual would go and service one of our students, but we can pick up the phone, call Ever-Driven, and a student needs picked up at one of these locale outside of our district. They will be picked up by a Ever-Driven driver that has been pre-certified and approved, and we have those clearances, and delivered to the school of our choice. It's not cheap, but it is just as economical as running a craft bus or one of our other service providers to pick up the students. But it does provide some immediate relief to us to get the students here on time. Sometimes we make accommodations and it's just I want to say, impossible for us to meet the criteria to get the student here. And some of those are, you have a student in an elementary school and in a high school, both residing outside the district in the same residency. That requires us to take 2 buses down or have that student either arrive late to the middle school or early to the elementary school. So this will provide us with a safety net. We'd like to get it started. Included was in board docs is their marketing brochure. There's the agreement, which also includes all the stipulations and the rates. And finally, we asked for a list of districts that are currently using it within Pennsylvania. And if you look at that list of references, we did call them so far. They have an excellent feedback rating on our personal calls. So we are excited to get them on board and start utilizing their services. So that will appear on Monday evening's board agenda next week.
Correct, and if you open up and look at the client list, it is the vast majority of our neighboring districts and districts in Chester County. It's like, we're one of the only ones who were not using them, almost.
Right, and they're in 43 states. I was surprised because we've been looking for a few alternatives, and unfortunately, no one was sharing this information until we came across a very small vendor booth in amongst about 1,000 other vendors. So a good find by Mr. Jenkins.
Are they able to ride share, you know, if somebody from Haven Grove and somebody from Kennett is going to Downingtown, you know, they...
Yes, they can. And we actually do that with our current transportation systems. In many cases, if our student resides in Downingtown, by law, they are to provide 50% of the cost of transportation. However, most of it is done just by convenience. So the transportation managers in Chester County are a close-knit group, and they work out many of these arrangements. But yes, to answer your question, they could pick up multiple students driving in from Wilmington, drop off here at Kennett, go down to Avon Grove or Oxford, and then continue to Coatesville. So yes, they can.
What's the savings from using the bus to this service?
It's more of a convenience than it is
Okay.
savings. Their rate is cheaper than running a full-size bus. It's more expensive than if I can coordinate a pickup with an existing bus run.
Okay.
So Mr. Jenkins will still have to make those decisions, but in many cases, it'll be for the first or second week until we can free up a bus or reroute, because we have to notify all the other individuals. By adding one student could change everybody's pickup time by 10 minutes. So it just gives us a little bit of flexibility because this can start relatively immediately, whereas adjusting our own transportation system many times takes several weeks. It's exactly like an Uber. Yes.
Can it or will it be used for special ed outplacements?
Yes, it can be, and that's another situation which I really didn't bring up this evening. But yes, we have some placements, and once again, these placements may happen on a Friday with a start date on Monday. So it can be very convenient for those type of situations too. They will provide also nurses, and because some of our students require nurses on there, so they do have some ancillary services which they can provide at additional cost. But yes, it can provide for both special education, even if it's a placement of one of our own students.
I'm sorry, I have so many questions today. I'm drinking water. Can you imagine if I drink coffee? How are we communicating this to parents? Because, I mean, I know this is new, but how are we communicating this to our parents?
The immediate conversation would happen between Tom Jenkins and the parents, as we do with all our, because he would have to tell that parent when the bus is coming to pick up, what bus it is. So in this case, he would communicate that as an ever-driven driver, they would be driving a yellow Toyota, and the driver's name is Brad. So all that information would be passed along to the parent, so the parent has an indication of who they're handing off their child to.
So this is something that is not going to be posted on the website? This is our new service?
No, because it's just one of many tools that we'd use in transportation to get students around.
Okay. Because I'm thinking the parents are probably waiting for a bus versus...
The parent would be contacted, and,
Yeah.
and we would let them know that, you know, that this is the transportation system, just similar to if we have a Downingtown or a Unionville, for example, has a Unionville on the side of their buses because they're in-house. So if we're using Unionville to pick up one of our Kennett students, we'll let that be known to the parents.
Okay, thank you.
The craft buses have GPS tracking we have access to. Does EverDriven have anything similar?
They have GPS tracking, although we will not have access to it.
Any other questions about EverDriven? If you do have any before the vote on Monday night, this will be on Monday night's agenda, correct?
That is correct.
let Mr. Tracy know, and we look forward to seeing this Monday night. Next, we're going to move on to an item that I've been talking to Mr. Tracy about for a bit here. We all know about our high school cafeteria being undersized and having to eat way too soon, and the hole it puts in scheduling. And there was studies done on how to expand the cafeteria services and what that might involve. And I asked that it be brought out to the board and to the public, because if we're going to do this, we need to start looking at it now. So is it going to be Mr. Bryce or Mr. Tracy, or a tag team?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finnegan. We've done several studies utilizing Breslin Architect. This is our latest, so sometimes we commission an architect to look at a very specific area in our buildings. We had them look at the administrative guidance suite at the high school several years ago. We've had them look at both the library at the high school and the middle school to look at minor renovations. Is something practical? Can we make maker spaces? Can we set up a mini cafe in the high school library? So we've looked at some of these items. They just haven't really gained enough traction or had that wow effect that we thought this may be a viable opportunity for the district. However, I think one of the comments early on from Dr. Rizzo-Saunders was, wow, that cafeteria at the high school needs some work. And it is something that I think everyone in this room is, really familiar with. For those of us that were around in 2005, 6, when we were going through the renovations, the building was pretty much landlocked. The one charge we had is the high school will remain the high school, and the exterior will remain that historic look of the high school. But it is really landlocked. There's not a lot of opportunity. The structure built in 1930 was not meant to go up, so the core structure, which is the auditorium, the cafeteria, really did not have the foundation and the walls to support moving up to 3 or 4 stories. But we have looked at it several times. Breslin Architects, about 2 months ago, we commissioned them to come in. They first sat down and they had multiple meetings with the high school administration, really talking about the core areas. And the core areas that were never expanded to meet the capacity of that school when we built the S wing, the new wing where the middle school used to be, is the auditorium, the cafeteria, and Reynolds Gym. There are the 3 core areas that really were never addressed through the renovation. We've done work on it. I don't want to say we haven't renovated. Actually, this summer we renovated the Aux Gym. Reynolds Gym was renovated a couple of years ago. So we've done things to clean it up. The cafeteria received terrazzo floor tiles, new lighting. The old tables went out, new tables went in. We cleaned up the serving line, so there was money invested, but you're still working within the parameters of that size, which doesn't fit the student body. So much so that years ago, when we had the classes of 350, we had to go from 3 lunch periods to 4. That meant kids were eating as early as probably about 10 o'clock and finishing almost 1:30. With the new schedule, they're moving back to 3, but they can only accommodate that because of 2 factors. One is our class sizes are getting smaller again, and the other one is the vocational kids, which is around 200, leave the campus and eat off campus. But it is still very tight, and I encourage anyone who would argue against that just to come to the cafeteria. So much so that, in a cafeteria, you always want to have extra seats so you're not forcing students to sit with individuals that they're not friends with, that they feel comfortable with. And that has been the long-standing tradition at Kennett High School, that there are very few empty seats up there. So we took a look at it in great depth, a lot of analysis on the front end, and 2 key factors came up. One, yes, the cafeteria is undersized. And what can we do to bring natural daylight into that space and give it a much more friendly environment for the students during that, as well as large group instruction? The second area was Reynolds Gym. The high school has no space to hold a full student body assembly. And that is very problematic. When we redid the Reynolds Gym bleachers several years back, we lost about 130 seats to make it ADA compliant. So out went the wood bleachers, new bleachers came in, there's wheelchair accessibility, and we lost a significant amount of seats. Even before we removed the seats, we couldn't fit the whole student body there. So think of things like graduation, where we only will hand out 2 tickets per graduating senior. Student assemblies have to be broken down into stages. So there's no one spot that can handle it. So the gym became a separate item, although that wasn't the initial focus. Then our discussions really went into, what do you do? Where does the new cafeteria go? If you're trying to bring daylight in, and they looked at several options. The ones that really floated to the top are in the presentation. I'm really not going to sit here and review them all. It's part of board docs. But there was one clear, evident winner when it came time to looking at how to fix the cafeteria. And that can be summed up by really building a second floor for the cafeteria out of the aux gym. And we're going to slide through to look at option 2. Oops. What page am I on? 6. Yeah, I was looking for option 2. Now it's not scrolling. No, too far. Works better in PowerPoint. Okay, here we go. Okay. So this is option 2, and this is the existing cafeteria. And what they've proposed is over here is a bunch of columns. We have students sitting over in this back corner right now. This is our traditional serving line is right here. They're going to push the serving lines out a little bit, but it's really this section that you want to focus on, and some of the graphics that are in here. They are actually going to build steps up to the second floor, the floor above this, which is the aux gym. So we're going to be losing the aux gym to expand the cafeteria. There's a series of normal tread stairs as well as wide tread stairs, and you're going to see that in a little bit. This is the second floor. This area where the cursor is rolling around is currently the aux gym. The aux gym has extended ceilings. Next week it's having new windows put in all around the top, so there's natural daylight coming in, as well as we could enter in some skylights. But we'd create a mezzanine over the existing cafeteria with the large steps going up through the center of it. In addition, these two areas over here, where I'm moving the cursor, they currently are locker rooms that service the aux gym, the original locker rooms for the high school. Remember, this aux gym was the original gym as part of the building. These are the locker rooms. The locker rooms right now are used for the thread shed. It's been used to house some offices, but basically it is defunct and we haven't used them in years. So they would create a couple large group of instruction spaces, meeting rooms over here. And you really have to look at some of these renderings to really get a feel. This is a dissection of it. These are the steps coming up. You'd have these amphitheater steps, which would make not only for nice seating and eating, but also if you had a proctor down here, could have some instruction going on in the steps. This is the second floor. These windows are already in place around the top. They've dropped some acoustical panels, some lights. This is actually some LED screen up here that could use to be project anything from movies to outdoor scenes. Here's the large group instruction rooms back here. And you can see that we opened this up. This has now a wall with doors in it. You open this up, so now it can be an open plan for more cafeteria-like serving. Here's another section from the first floor. This is currently where you walk in from the front wing. You're coming into the cafeteria. You can see the steps going up. There's an additional room back here. This is sort of like a blind section right now where students sit. This would be another opportunity for a small group instruction room. And here's a straight-on look right up the steps going into the second floor. And here's the final view. This is another look from the upstairs. You can see the steps surrounded by some railing. So I think everyone that has seen this concept has really fallen in love with this concept. There's a price tag that comes associated with this. The issue is that this is not realistic right now because we would lose the cafeteria and the aux gym for the good part of 12 months, and that's an aggressive time schedule, 12 months. So where do the kids, and we would keep the cafeteria functional, we'd keep the kitchen functional during the course of renovation until they hit the kitchen, which we would do probably in the last phase of the summer. However, the cafeteria, so it's relocating the student body during the cafeteria to eat. And that has proven to be very problematic. We're still working on it. I don't want to say that it's zero opportunity, but I know that we're going to be taking a closer look. The high school administration came back and said it's a deal breaker right now unless we build the gym first, and that's going to be phase 2. We have an estimate just to do the cafeteria of about $6 million to do the cafeteria. Now, they do lose the aux gym, which creates some scheduling, and some outside organizations use our aux gym all the time. Here's Reynolds Gym. The second part of the presentation really focuses on Reynolds Gym.
But Reynolds Gym is not impacted by
It is
the
not.
cafeteria.
It's just the cafeteria.
So in this vision, Reynolds Gym would become the aux gym.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well said. Where does the new gym go? Right on Mr. Bryce's office and his staff. It's right here. This is currently I refer to them kindly as the bus garage, because when I came here, they're all bus garages. Now it is the maintenance facility. So we have multiple garages. We have office areas for Mr. Bryce, his admin assistant, our director of custodial services, Tom Jenkins, and his admin assistant. So we have 5 individuals that are housed up there, as well as it services the entire maintenance fleet up here. So they not only have all their vehicles stored up here, much of their equipment is stored in this area, as well as their own office area and kitchens located back here. So all of that would have to be removed. This footprint is much larger. Just off the edge, this building up here is the tech building and weight room. So that would remain. The existing end of the building is just slightly off that wall. So this is a much larger footprint. What we're looking at is a spectator seating of about 1,200. It is the total of 2 basketball courts going against what you're seeing there. This is how they would play for competitions, but there's actually basketballs going this way and this way. So it's 2 full courts. And then when you pull out the bleachers, of course, you're covering up part of this court, so you'd have a competition court in the middle. On the first floor, you would have concessions, you'd have public restroom area, you'd have a concession stand, and this is all lobby. What I thought was really unique, and you'll see this under one of the other renderings, there is a connecting corridor that comes off the back wing of the high school. So if you're looking at the high school now, there are steps traversing up underneath the music arch. Right at the end here is the end of the building. There's just a little set of stairs that goes up and enters the building off the side. They would actually enter out of that back classroom, and this is a semi-underground hallway that would be built. The steps would actually go over top of it as you walk up. So from the front, you would actually see it, and there's a nice rendering here, into this open area. They could go upstairs into the annex building, which services our robotics area. It services our tech and services our weight room. So let's just scroll through this. This gives you a little, really doesn't affect all of our parking for the buses. All the traffic loops are the same. You can see the steps now going up over top of the corridor. And scroll. This is a picture. You can sort of see this is undisturbed. This would be a new set of steps going up over top. These are actually transom windows. See them right there? There's 3 of them in a row. That would provide daylight into the hallway. On this side, you would not, so it would be pretty much underground. This is a ramped walkway for handicap accessibility up to the upper level. This is a rather large, it's 2 stories on this end. Over here, it's a 1-story up to our tech wing, which you really could never. One of the problems that we had when students were going back and forth between the buildings, trying to keep the building secure, we never wanted students to go outside. This would allow us to actually reach these ancillary type services all indoors without breaching our exterior doors. This is an inside view. And this gives you a pretty clear indication of how this goes. So it's a much larger footprint. This is about 30,000 square feet of space. This building is estimated about 29 million. Just the addition. That's right. Yep, about 35 to 36 million all in. And then there's also the cost of relocating transportation and maintenance. I would need to find a facility that could accommodate, which is a little cheaper than many of our structures that we've been buying. But we would have to relocate them somewhere. And we don't have a current place in mind yet, but this would really be nice for spectator parking, because right now, if you come here and we have a spectator event, either up at the high school on the track or at Reynolds Gym, parking becomes somewhat of a nightmare. So if everybody parked out here in the lower parking lots, we would be adding another lower parking lot in front of the high school. Right, there's already one parking lot here, then drops down, there's 2 more, so that would be added. So that's the plan. We wanted to keep you in the loop, and from the initial discussion, my thought was, let's focus on the cafeteria. We have roughly, 26 million sitting in our capital reserve. It is something we could tap into, make an immediate impact. Once you add the gym, I knew it would be very problematic, because when we started embarking on the elementary project, as that project scope, we really pushed our debt limit. So, right now, the only way you can afford a project where you're going out and borrowing money is to put it on top of the existing debt. Now, we just removed $541,000 off that debt. To accomplish this, if we paid for the cafeteria out of capital reserve, so we would just finance the gym, it's roughly $1.2 million we need on top of our existing debt, which really puts us at a place where we can't afford to do this for several years. And when I say several, more like 5, 6, and that's if we can start, putting a little bit of money away into debt each year to finance this. It'll get easier, but we're looking at 20 years before we pay off the first debt service. That's only 1 of 4. A couple of our debt service for the elementary projects go out 27 years. So we've got some debt out there for a while, but the first one gets paid off in 20 years. So you're gonna need to pay a little bit of that off. We have some 5-year calls, which means we can refinance those bonds, and we have some 8-year calls. So there will be an opportunity down the road if interest rates drop for us to refinance and capitalize and maybe squeeze some of this debt in there. But as far as a long-term plan, a building philosophy, this would set really Kennett up where they have capacity in every one of their buildings. So, we're still having ongoing discussions. We just thought it was important to bring it forward to the board. We've shared this with the administration. We shared it with our administrative team. I think everybody likes the plan. Certainly it would be tweaked a little bit as we go through land development and architectural reviews, but it does provide relief for 2 of the 3 areas that currently are landlocked at the high school.
Okay.
It's good to dream big.
It's good to try, and again, from our conversations and ours as well, that the only thing stopping us from doing the cafeteria first, which we have in the reserves, is the loss of the auxiliary gym. And I asked, was there a time study done of the actual usage of that and how you can get around it? There's a gym here in Mary D. Lang within walking distance. There's lots of different ideas that have to be done, but is the loss of the auxiliary gym really a showstopper or not?
Yes, there was no official time study done. No one sat outside and really, the central office administration relied on the high school to give us their perspective on whether or not they could maintain the high school schedule and activities without the aux gym. That answer came back no. A lot of that was based upon the 12 months while it's under renovation. Because right now, the Reynolds Gym already serves multiple gym classes simultaneously. So to lose the aux gym, you need to feed the kids somewhere, and it can't be Reynolds Gym. So it's cafeteria, which is used for overflow, which is another name for, I don't want to call it a study hall because I think that is an outdated terminology, but if we have multiple teachers that are out and we consolidate classes, we have individuals that will report to the auditorium. So you need to find space to feed 350 kids. And that's problematic because we do not have a duty period for our teachers to, supervise students if you disperse them between 10 classrooms. So you need to provide supervision throughout the building. So it's a problem that we're looking at. We just received this report probably about a month and a half ago. So the next phase is really take a hard look and really sit down with the high school administration and say, maybe do that time study.
Yeah.
Maybe to get creative and start, having some discussions with the Kennett Education Association, say what is possible within the confines of our contract to loosen schedules, to allow these kids to eat in classes, or can we incentivize to give up a prep period to supervise students? So those discussions haven't occurred, but we knew that this was out there. We wanted to present it to the committee and the board and share the information as we continue to investigate and see if there's something feasible in the future.
Mark, how long did you say the new gym would take to construct?
The new gym would be close to 2 years if we.
2 years for that?
Yes, because that's a full-blown renovation similar to an
Wow.
elementary school. I mean,
Okay.
our elementary schools are 105. You're looking at existing site with students, which slows everything down on the site. You probably might be able to get out 18 months if everything goes, but you're also talking about this would require land development. You know, one of my biggest concerns is stormwater management, because we would most likely have to expand the underground water retention basins in the front of the high school, which are currently there. So we're running out of stormwater management space, you know, at the high school. We can't, we used to call it the field hockey field right in front of the district office. That has springs. That was not suitable for underground water retention when we did the last renovation. I'm sure that didn't change. So you're looking at really working on those front grassy areas in the high school for these massive, deep underground retention basins.
That field used to be a pond back in the day,
Yes.
pond and ice skating. But I mean, I really would like to see the time study about the use of Reynolds Gym and the auxiliary gym and how much they overlap and completely use, because to do the gym first of all, we can't afford it. And second of all, you're 2 years before you even, minimum, before you even start looking into the cafeteria, which is more what we needed. So, yeah, I'd like to see some studies on that, but it's somehow we can address the bigger problem, which is the cafeteria space somehow. But
Right.
I'll leave that up to administration to tackle that one.
The Mike Finnegan Gymnasium has a nice ring to it.
The labware.
The labware.
Cafeteria.
All I had was the library gym.
That's right, the lab.
So just based on current funding needs and based on current debt service, I heard you say this is not currently possible until 5 or 6 years down the road?
That's correct, at best. I mean, without the board, I mean, there's a couple ways. If the board felt it was a priority, I don't want to say, you know, in our fiscal plan currently, it's not. The board could always go out and do a referendum for the additional debt. You know, and you could do that anytime during the course of the year. We would just have to structure it for a general election. You could do it for that specific cause. If it was approved by, you know, the
Understood.
community, you would have to, that gets repealed, so that can't carry on beyond the project. So in 10 years after you pay off the debt, you couldn't just stagger up the next debt. You'd have to lower your taxes, and that goes back. You could, you know, make a concerted effort to include part of this in next year's budget and reduce other expenditures. So I don't want to say no, it's just.
Yeah, I appreciate, I mean, I'm not trying, I just want to clarify.
Yes.
Right, for anybody who's out there and for myself, that this is a need that has been identified at the high school, that the cafeteria is not useful. I mean, it is, but it's really not a good space for our students. And that the gymnasium is unable to house a full school assembly due to the current capacity of the bleachers. And these are needs that have been identified, and we have a plan that has been created to help solve those things. But at this point, we are no further than that, right? We have cost structures you've provided, which we haven't gone through yet, and I'm sure you're about to go through. Some of the debt service outlines as to how that would work. But from a board, well, from a personal perspective as a member of the board, let me phrase it that way. Given the challenges that we are currently facing around funding, around an upcoming teacher's contract, around uncertainty around federal funding, this is to be decided by the board as to whether it is a priority, but we recognize there are other priorities that may take precedence. I would just say that. That's all I got.
but the plan is so exciting. If the students see it, they will just be like, do it now. It's a great, great plan.
Yes, I love both concepts. I think I lean more into the cafeteria because, you know, if you think about it, when you go to the cafeteria and you start eating, having lunch, it's like a social connector. You can connect with other students. You can have interactions. You can see it as your happy place. And right now, my understanding is the cafeteria is the same as when I graduated in 1998. I think the tables have been changed, and that's it. So I like the cafeteria idea, definitely.
The cafeteria used to be the high school and the middle school as well. But unlike the 5 years that we started planning for the two new elementary schools to assure that it was done with no tax increase, these plans would be a tax increase unless there's some very large cut someplace. And that's the decisions we have to make.
Didn't, Mark, you say that we have 26 in reserves that we can use so for the cafeteria, if it's 16?
Yeah, we have our capital reserve, which stands at There we go. Yeah, we have our capital reserve account, which provides funding for our 5-year capital improvement plan. That stands at $26 million. We were looking at taking the $6 million out of that to fund. However, I would not recommend depleting that. You could certainly take more of that, but Mr. Bryce presented back in February our 5-year plan. We had some big ticket items, not huge ticket items, but big ticket items such as the middle school roof. It's hard to believe that needs a new roof already, but we have that already on the horizon. That is probably the largest. The second largest is the high school building automation system, which we'd like to do next year. That's $1 million. Certainly if you want to take that 6 and push it to a 10, okay, but that's not going to change the debt service enough to really put a dent into what would occur. So that's out there. That'll continue to be out there. We only spend that according to what the board approves in June of our 5-year plan. There's not a tremendous drawdown on the horizon. However, if we decide to go out and purchase either land or acquire a garage of sorts to move facilities and maintenance, that's not incorporated into this program. So that's going to be several million just to make that occur as well. But we'll continue to look at, financing strategies. We're all excited about the potential, and that's good to know it's out there because even if it's not in 5 years, if it's 10 years, I think we have at least a good foundation for resolving some, historic problems with the building. All right, I'm not really going to take a dive into the financial. It's in there. You'll see a $30 million bond issue just to really get a sense of how much money it would cost doing 3 $10 million bond issues, which is the most economic for us because anything under $10 million, we don't have to get insured. It's bank rated. Over $10 million, we start to incur additional cost. And then we took a look if we financed everything and didn't take the $6 million out of our capital reserve. So that's all included in your package, just in full transparency of where the numbers came from. If there's no other questions on the high school, we'll just move into the last item on the agenda, which is...
Other than I look forward to some creative ideas on how to possibly do the cafeteria first.
Okay. We'll continue that endeavor. The last thing on this evening's agenda, the board in September, I think it was September 11th of 2023, that information is in board docs. Thank you, Dan. We have that is actually the resolution language, the introductory language in the agenda from that meeting. The board did commit 2 areas because when we staged into debt, it's not a perfect world. We had 2 blips in our debt service schedule that caused us to put some money aside, and we did that through a commitment of funds. We need to increase just because of the staggering that we're finally done. We had 1.5 million, actually 1.55 million set aside in this year. So Dr. Brady put these commitment of funds. If you pulled our audit report, you would see 1.55 million and another $500,000, which was set for 26-27. When we just looked at all of our debt service schedules, the first one was right on target because we had the 3 bond issues in place. This 4th one caused the first year to blip a little bit higher than anticipated. So I need a total of $650,000. We have 500 on reserve, so I'm asking for the board to commit another $153,000. That will save us from overexpending our line item next year. And then you can see with the illustration once we're at that level, we'll continue at 7.65 million thereafter. So we just had these two blips that hit one last year, I'm sorry, one this current year and one next year that we needed to address, and now we're back at level debt as far as you can see.
And that comes from reserve, right?
That does, yes.
I asked only so I can appropriately make comments next week. And I know you'll be there to help me if need be.
Okay, any questions on that or anything else that we discussed tonight? No? Well, in that case, we will be adjourned.